Hello, it's me back again to haunt you with another video that is many months late. In mid-July, I travelled to Albania. After 12 hours of travel, I went to bed at like 4 a.m. I was travelling from Paris, so I went Paris to Vienna, and then Vienna to Tirana in Albania, and it was a very long travel. So I spent the first day slowly exploring. The nice thing is everything was within a 10-minute walk of each other, all the things worth seeing, which was very ideal for me. I was not mentally prepared for how warm it was. I think it was upwards of 35 degrees and I was just constantly sweating. A lot of people are like, why did you decide on Albania? And honestly, I'm not sure myself. It came into my mind that it was somewhere I wanted to see a year ago, and it just kind of stuck with me, and I'm really not sure what first inspired me to even consider it as a place to travel to. But the more I thought about it, I think it was a confirmation bias the more I saw about Albania. And when the time came when I had to leave Paris but I didn't want to go back to the UK yet because I still had summer left, I thought, hey, why not? I think the first day I really took just to relax and settle into the idea that I was traveling again. I think it was quite sad because I had to leave my partner. I just needed space to process where I was, and so I was just quite antisocial. Hello. I am, as you may be able to tell, officially in Albania. I'm in Tirana, and I found this really cool park. Google Maps showed me it. It's called the Great Park, and it's huge, and it's on this really beautiful lake. And honestly, I walked around maybe a third of the lake. It's huge, but it's so lovely, and it's like a park, and you can just go sit under a tree and look out at the lake, and there's all the mountains in the background and the city, and it's so beautiful, and there's so much nature around. Like, you can hear the crickets and the birds, and I really needed this because it's been really intense. And where I was staying before in Paris, it was just packed also because of the Olympic Games coming up. It was just insane, and this is such a 180. I found the city to be so calm and quiet, and considering it's like peak tourist season and there are tourists around, there's not been that many people. And when I'm on a road, like, people are so far away and it's not bustling, and it's just calm. It's just nice. I'm having a great time. I had a bit of a hard time getting here though, because I had to fly from Paris to Vienna and then have like a 10-hour layover in Vienna and then fly from Vienna to Tirana. And my original flight was going to be at like 11:30 at night, and it ended up being delayed by 2 hours, and so we only left at 1:30, and I was so tired because I'd been up since 4 a.m. in the morning, the previous morning. So by the time I actually arrived at the hostel, I had been traveling for 24 hours, which is, it was rough. I was just so exhausted. I couldn't even fathom how exhausted I was. I was just grumpy. I had the worst headache. I felt sick. It was not fun. But once I actually arrived in Tirana, once I landed, everything was so smooth. Baggage collection, my bag was one of the first ones out. Getting through passport control, it was an e-gate for British citizens, so I just tapped my way through. There was someone right there with a SIM card. I was like, I'm taking that, please. There were taxis who were actually really reasonably priced and knew the hostel I was going to and offered to take me, and they were really nice. I got to the hostel really quickly, and then the hostel staff were all really nice and just made the process really easy for me, considering it was 4 a.m. I felt so bad for them as well because it was 4 a.m. And I finally showered and tucked myself in bed at 4:30 in the morning. It's been a bit of a slow day because obviously I've just had a really rough traveling experience, but honestly, there's everything to do in Tirana is in such a central area that I did pretty much everything I had on my list within 4 hours. It's not the biggest of cities, so there's not that much to do. There are definitely other things I can do if I want to and if I have the time in other days that I'm here, but in theory I have officially done all of the touristy things I'd planned. I got to go into the only mosque that's here. It was really nice because they give you coverings so you can actually enter. A lot of the time you can't actually enter mosques if you're not Muslim, but here they were very welcoming to visitors, so it was really sweet. I went to Bunk Art, the Bunk Art 2, which is more central than the first Bunk Art, which is further out of town. But basically it's a bunker that got turned into a museum about the communist / fascist rule that happened in the 1900s in Albania, and it was intense. I was there for a really long time, like 2.5 hours. To be fair, I think like a lot of other people went much quicker than me. I was like way longer than most people who entered, but it's because I was I just wanted to like really be there, and like I read literally everything, every little sign. I read everything because I was learning so much about how the system worked back then, how fucked up it was. There was so much I didn't know or wasn't aware of, and to have it laid out and like have all the testimonies and paperwork and stuff there was so interesting. And they did a really good job of translating stuff. Like some stuff, like it wasn't perfectly translated, but it was super understandable, and it was a really, really interesting experience. And then I found a really cute cafe called Botanica, and the staff was so friendly, and I sat there and had a delicious meal and the most lovely lemonade. It was called rose lemonade, which I've never had before, but it was so refreshing because it is so hot here. If you can't tell, I am just constantly sweating. It's like 33, 34 degrees. When I arrived at 4 a.m., it was 29 degrees. So it was a bit difficult getting to sleep because it was so fucking warm. But yeah, I'm really grateful that it's warm, and I really love it, but I'm not used to it anymore. It's been a year, I think, since I've been in such heat, so my body's like, what the fuck? But it's nice. I'm enjoying it. Yeah, and I'm just enjoying going with the flow. I think I've had like semi-plans, but nothing too rigid, and that's kind of like going to be the vibe my whole trip is. I have semi-plans and I have some things booked like hostels and stuff, but for the most part it's going to be just going with the flow and doing what I feel like in the moment, which is nice. I think I'm traveling in a bit more loose of a fashion than I normally do, which is like kind of a fun, refreshing way to do it. A part of me is like, we must plan down to the T, but I'm like, no, this is nice, this is good, this is not a bad thing. I've also like absolutely been devouring my books recently. I've been reading the Cool Print series, and it has just taken up so much of my brain space and time, and this is the perfect like space where there's like not that much to do, where I can just find cute places to sit and read. And isn't that just the best thing you've ever heard? Isn't that what life's all about? Just finding cute places to sit and read. Anyway, I'm gonna go hydrate. That's the most I've spoken all day.
On my second day, I went to the House of Leaves, which is a museum that used to be the headquarters for information derived from spying.
It's another beautiful boiling day. I just went to the House of Leaves Museum, and it was so intense. It was like kind of a continuation of what I was learning about yesterday during like the communist fascist regime, and basically it's like the house of surveillance. But it was really interesting, and I learned so much. And now I'm on my way to lunch because I'm so hungry and I might pass out.
That evening, I actually ended up speaking to people because I had honestly been isolating myself and recharging, but I finally felt ready to integrate myself, and I had a really lovely evening with everyone. I met some really nice people. The next day, I did a tour to Lake Bovola, and it was honestly so worth it. I think I must have paid £20, and that included like the trip there and back and a tour guide, and it was so lovely, like such a lovely day trip. The water was stunning. The minerals in the water make it that blue, and so it was just amazing. And we had a few pit stops along the way. We checked out some waterfalls, and it was so lovely just to also get out the city and see the surrounding nature, because I knew there were some really beautiful natural parks nearby. We hiked to a really good viewpoint, which was a very easy hike. It was like a 40-minute walk, really, not even a hike, but very, very sweaty. Once again, very warm. I was just perpetually sweating. We even got to actually swim in the water, which was really amazing. It was so warm and refreshing that it was like very hard to convince us to get out. That evening was my first night out in Tirana, and we actually went clubbing, or like at least attempted to go clubbing with newfound friends. The next day, I got my bus to Skoda. I was told that they had one more seat in the bus, and when I got on the bus, there were no seats. And the man holds up a cushion, and he was like, "No, seat," and he puts the cushion on the floor, and that is where I sat for 2.5 hours. I have so much to do tonight because I'm going on the Valbo hike very last minute, tomorrow at 6 a.m. So I need to pack for that hike. I need to repack my entire backpack and leave everything I don't need. And I need to do a lot of messaging. I need to make sure I will be okay without signal that whole time. So I have to do some stuff for my internship. It's gonna be a crazy night. I'm not sure if I made it very clear at the time because I was very frantic, but basically they were all leaving for a hiking trip organised by the Wanderers Hostel, who organises most of these hiking trips. They were leaving the next day at 6 a.m. and I was also planning on doing this hiking trip, but not the next day at 6 a.m. They were very convincing, however, and very lovely, and I thought it would be nice to do the hike with people I already knew, and so I agreed to swap my dates. This led to us having to frantically cycle back into Skoda from the small town we were in to book my space before the hostel closed their bookings at 9 p.m. So we arrived on bicycles, sweaty and panting as she was closing the door. She opened up again, she let me book on, and I left the next morning at 6 a.m. It was a really long journey to get to the start of the hike, which was Valbone. It was mostly just a day of travel. We had to get a bus and then a ferry for like 2 hours, then another bus, and then we arrived late that afternoon. And it was such a beautiful area. Just to be transported like into the mountains was amazing. The next morning, one very bumpy car ride later to the hiking start point, we began the hike. The group kind of separated naturally and we all walked together in pockets. In total, there were 50 of us on this tour, so we didn't really need to walk together. I think the actual hike was like 17 kilometers that day, and it was very beautiful. Once again, my fear of heights were heavily tested, as they were this entire trip. But it was so lovely. We came across multiple trail dogs who were so friendly and sweet. As you can see, the views were just insane. We managed to arrive in Theth in good time, and so we actually did an additional little hike to a waterfall and we went swimming. It was fucking freezing, so cold. It was some of the coldest water I've ever swum in, I think around 3 degrees. It was freezing. No one stayed in very long. It was like painful despite how warm the air was. So we ended up just relaxing around the water rather than in the water. That evening, the mountains really came to life because there was a huge party. Apparently, every evening, the hostel has a massive party, and even the middle-aged Dutch people with hiking sticks were absolutely twerking it. The next morning, we all got a ride from a 17-year-old unlicensed man to a hiking point to get to the Blue Eye. And the Blue Eye, as you can see, it's like a pool of water from a waterfall that literally looks like a blue eye. This was factually the coldest water I've ever swum in. I think it was about 1 degree, and it was great because we could get really beautiful pictures of the waterfall without anyone in it, because it was so cold you could not get in for more than a few seconds. And I proudly can say I did get in and was promptly hyperventilating and had to like crawl out. That evening, once again, another evening of dancing, partying, raki shots, which is very strong Albanian alcohol, which really put me off alcohol for a very long time, basically the rest of the trip. The next day we went back to Skoda, had a final meal with everyone before saying goodbye. Once again, I was convinced to shift my plans because 3 of my closest friends from this trip were going to Montenegro, and I agreed to go with them, really in my spontaneous era. Right after Skoda, we went to Helsinki for 1 night. Really, so as much of the city as we possibly could, but we weren't there for very long.
It doesn't make it easy. The other piece of my heart moves slow, somewhere in the great unknown. When I return from the afterglow, will you carry me like I am whole again? Wait, hold on.
The next morning, we had to absolutely sprint because we almost missed our bus, but we got a bus to Podgorica, where we picked up a car that we were renting and drove that car to Dermator National Park, where we stayed in the most adorable wooden cabin.
Put me together, take me back where I belong. I want it all.
Once again, the scenery was just unreal. It felt like a fairy tale, and the first afternoon we got there, we just explored the area. I went to a few key sites with the car because we actually wanted to really take advantage of the fact that we actually had a car. It was just magical. It was so beautiful. The scenery, the flowers, the fields, the mountains, the sunset, everything was just like breathtaking.
If I could take you back to my youth, show you what I wish I knew. My will is strong with the...
Our first full day in Dermator, we tackled the longest hike I've ever done in one day. It was 28 kilometers long, I believe, roughly.
Just marching to your death into the water.
It took us 9 hours to complete, and at the very beginning, a trail dog latched onto us and followed us the entire way. It was insane, like literally the full 9 hours. So we called her Lassie, and she was absolutely adorable, but potentially got a bit too attached. This hike was really visually stunning because it was so diverse. You went from forests into these wide fields, into these very rocky, mountainous areas, and it was probably the best hike I've ever done. I think also because it was so long, it just allowed for so much change of scenery. We even got to see some wild horses, and it was really funny when Lassie came upon them. It was kind of like a battle of whales. They were both really confused about the other one. At the top, we had lunch and recovered and just like tried to breathe, because not only was this a very long hike, but the elevation was insane. It was very steep in a lot of parts, and I think the parts I managed to video were the flattest parts because I could breathe and actually hold the camera like steady, but it was a violent fight to get to the top. Honestly, although I travel a lot, I still have a really hard time being spontaneous, and I can be quite set in my ways. And I think this trip really opened up a new way of life for me, one where we were booking our Airbnbs the night before we were going to stay in them. And while there are pros and cons to planning things at the last minute versus planning them well in advance, as I am wont to do, obviously you don't always get the coolest accommodation if you're booking it last minute, I also found it so refreshing, at times anxiety inducing, but also incredibly refreshing. I would definitely travel in this way again, especially when I have longer stretches of time. It makes for such fun stories, and if I hadn't said yes to this, I would never have been able to do this amazing hike and travel with some amazing people that I just met. It's these kind of stories that were completely unplanned that really just make a trip and can really make an amazing lifetime of memories. And look at me being incredibly sappy. But anyway, the next day we drove down to Kotor, and once again, the drive was just stunning. The mountain ranges were wild. Kotor was such a lovely mix. It was the most touristy city we had been in so far, so I think that wasn't as ideal because it was very busy, but it was a beautiful city right on the sea with amazing mountain ranges all around. And it was such a lovely afternoon because when we arrived, we just went to the beach and played card games for ages and swam. It was also so crazy, and it just shows how connected the Balkans are really, because when we were in Kotor, we ended up bumping into another friend who did the hike with us, which is crazy because that was days and days ago and that was in another country, and we just bumped into her on the street. That evening, it was our last evening all together, and we went out for a music festival that was happening in the city. It was all in Albanian. We didn't know any of the performers, we didn't know any of the songs, but the vibes were impeccable. There was confetti, there were balloons, it was a vibe. It was a really great last evening. I woke up at 6 a.m. the next morning because honestly that is the best time to hike, either in the morning or late evening, because it's so warm during the day. And myself and one of the Dutch guys went up to the castle ruins. Very sweaty, but very worth it.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic.
We had a very sad goodbye, and I caught my bus back to Tirana while the others headed towards Dubrovnik. And once again, I couldn't enter Europe, so I couldn't keep being spontaneous and following them, but I was really ready to go back and see Albania in a slightly quicker period than I'd initially intended, and I actually think that worked out for the best because 3.5 weeks in Albania is quite a long time. It was a really rough bus ride, honestly, and it lasted 4 hours longer than it was meant to. So when I got back to Tirana, I just absolutely crashed and then had to wake up early the next morning to get my bus to Gjirokasta. I luckily felt a bit more refreshed and a bit more like emotionally recovered, because I think it was quite a transition to go from traveling with people to back to traveling alone. That evening I went on a walking tour with the hostel, which is the best time to do a walking tour. Honestly, all the walking tours I did were in the evening.
Jumping from cliffs so high, trusting our wings to fly. Sometimes we're crashing down, but we get up and start from the ground.
My first full day there, myself and some friends I made explored 2 houses that were previously owned by the rich families of the area, which are now open to the public. And it was so interesting because we could learn about how the traditional household functioned, what the different rooms were for, how everything worked. It was quite a patriarchal system, but I'll be surprised. There's literally a built-in peephole so that the woman of the house could peek through and see how many men were sitting in there, so she could get them all tea but didn't have to actually enter the room and have her face seen by all these men.
Down, even if the sky is falling down, yeah. The sky is falling down.
That evening, the hostel also organised a walk to the old stone bridge nearby, which was really cute, and we got to see all these goats crossing during the sunset, and it was just very wholesome. And once again, found another dog. There were just dogs everywhere, and I'm living for it because they're also really taken care of by the locals. The next day, I went with one of my friends to the castle. It was honestly very haunting because there were prison cells there, and it's where a lot of people were locked up during the communist period. There were a lot of words engraved in the wall and everything, and it felt very emotional. I was also reading Chronicle in Stone at the time, which was set in Gjirokasta, and Ismail Kadara, the author, was from there. So I think I felt very immersed in how the city used to be. I had a lovely final evening playing cards with everyone before grabbing a bus to Berat the next morning. It was a very beautiful city, but I have to say there was very little to do. The two key things you can do in Berat are A, go on a canyon tour, which is a day trip, and I didn't really have the time for that, and it was also very expensive. And they have wine tours because it's a region where they make a lot of wine, but I was very off alcohol at that point after some rough times with the rakia previously mentioned. I wasn't going to be doing that. There were some very beautiful views for sunset, however, and both nights I was there, I made the ascent. It was very well worth it. It also allowed me some time to catch up on my internship and get some reading done, so I wasn't complaining with the downtime. On my final evening, I also did a walking tour and I got to learn more about the region, and I think developed a bit of a deeper appreciation for Berat, because I think towards the end I was really ready to leave. After 2 nights in Berat, I headed to Hamara. I actually cut my Berat stay 1 night short, so I ended up staying in a hostel for 1 night in Hamara and for 5 nights in the hostel I previously booked, just because my initial hostel didn't have space.
I am officially in Hamara, which is my last stop, which is so sad. I have 5 nights here, and then I head back to Tirana, and yeah, honestly a bit heartbroken about the fact that this is my last stop, but I think it's gonna be beautiful. I have so many fun plans. It's such a stunning city. I'm right by the beach in my hostel. Well, I will be from tomorrow, so yeah, looking forward.
Literally within an hour of arriving in Hamara, I bumped into 3 different people I knew from other hostels, from Shirokasta and from Tirana. Like, I was literally in a taxi with 2 of them going to a beach when we drove past the 3rd guy that I recognized, and it felt like a movie moment. Like, driver, stop the car! I know that man! It was crazy. So anyway, all 3 of us went to this beautiful beach called Filikuri Beach, which was a bit of a hike from the city, and it was very scary. Once again, heights, challenge. You were basically descending a cliff and had to hold on to this rope to get down. The following day, I actually rented a deck chair, which I never do, but it was well priced. I had a lovely day of cycling through reading and then swimming, and then reading and then swimming, and it was great. In the evening, I went with some of my friends on a boat tour. It was basically a beach hopping boat tour. We got to see all these different smaller beaches that are mostly only accessible via sea, via boats, and we also got to see a few caves that you can only see from the seafront. There was one where they actually let us all just jump in the water and you swim through this tunnel almost, and it was kind of scary because the water was pushing through the tunnel and you could get pushed back, but it was so beautiful. They were playing some really great music, mostly from 2015, and it kind of just felt very momentous, almost like we were in a movie once again. It was just very picturesque. on my, I believe, second full day, I went kayaking with friends, which was physically exhausting because kayaking for 3 hours is just absolute murder to the arms. But we were trying to do a beach hopping type experience, and one of our friends actually took a paddleboard, which was a terrible idea, and I think he had the worst time amongst all of us. But it was a very fun trauma bonding experience. On my third day, I went on a coastal walk and came across yet another secret beach area after wandering through many very expensive built-up beaches. And it wasn't quite a beach, it was more a concrete slab and rock where a restaurant used to be. But it was so lovely because really no one was there. It felt really special, it felt like our place. And we ended up actually going multiple times. Like, I woke up the next morning and went straight there with the same friends. On my final night, I hiked with a friend to the castle ruins because apparently every city just casually has a castle in the Balkans. The views. I'm obsessed with sunsets. It is always the best for me. Like, it is when I'm happiest, and I just absolutely loved all of it. Gonna be so worth it. My final morning before I had to leave, I woke up early and I went back to Filicura Beach by myself to round off the amazing experience.
I'm sweaty as fuck, but I'm here and I'm the only one here, there's no one else. It's so beautiful and I climbed this all by myself. I did this all by myself. So proud.
Overall, the people I met really made this trip. It was so lucky because most of the people I came across in hostels were also solo travelers, and we could make so many special memories and have so many amazing times together. I did meet an ungodly number of Australians. Do not go to Albania if you are not prepared for a large number of Australians to greet you at every hostel you go to. But overall, it just felt so great. Everyone's all in the same boat, we're all traveling alone. There's something so special about sharing moments together with new friends and having all these experiences and knowing like this can never be recreated exactly how it is now. The fact that it's unplanned and you just happen to be in the same place at the same time, it makes it so special. Like I said before, everywhere is just so connected. You always bump into the same people in different hostels, different countries, different areas. I also have such a deep appreciation of the Balkans and the nature and the culture and the city styles. It's all so stunning. Albanians specifically are so welcoming and friendly. It felt like such a special time to go as Albania isn't that touristy compared to other areas. Like the tourism isn't as built up. It felt like a bit more of an authentic experience. And obviously, if you couldn't tell, Himara was my favorite place in Albania. I think of it every day, but there are so many places I never got the chance to explore, and also so many areas in the Balkans I never got to go to, like Bosnia. I really wanted to go to Bosnia Herzegovina, so I'm definitely planning on going back.